For some areas, it takes less than 30 minutes of rainfall, intense or not, to wreak havoc. For others, it can take just a few hours of rains to cause major, life-threatening flooding over a wide area that can last days. But before we dive into why it floods, we need to understand how the country floods, and to do this, I reference a few areas I visited earlier last year. Trinidad and Tobago experiences several types of flooding. The one that you may have heard of is riverine flooding. That occurs when significant rains fall over a large portion of the country, causing our major watercourses and rivers to overtop its banks, and that occurs in the St. Joseph River right next to me or the Caroni River all the way to my back. Now, when these rivers overtop, they cause flooding for several days across a large portion of the country. But while it certainly is the most impactful, it's not the only type of flooding. Coastal flooding is as its name suggests, water moving onshore from a nearby sea or ocean. Trinidad and Tobago, this happens for a couple of reasons. We have tropical storms producing storm surge that floods low-lying areas, long period swells that produce large battering waves in nearshore bays and beaches. We also have higher than usual high tides, and that's combined with elevated sea level rise due to climate change and global warming that floods coastal areas. Street flooding is the most common type of flooding in Port of Spain. It occurs when heavy rainfall overwhelms the drainage network, causing flooding in low-lying areas and areas where drains are no longer sufficient to capture the volume of water that falls. And last but not least, flash flooding is an intense high-velocity torrent of water that comes down in an existing watercourse, and it can happen on the order of minutes to hours. Now, flash flooding is incredibly dangerous due to the high-velocity nature of the water, and it can bring down large rocks and debris like you see strewn behind me, and even cars like we saw earlier in 2021. And now back to this year. We know the flood types and some of their causes, but why is flooding getting worse? The first culprit officials now point to is climate change. Climate change is changing the way we experience rainfall in the Caribbean region, including Trinidad and Tobago. We're seeing less overall rainfall, something already that has materialized in the country, but when rain does fall, it comes in extreme amounts and in short periods of time, causing life-threatening flash and riverine flooding. Earlier this year, extreme rainfall in Sangre Grande at the end of April, nearly 8 times than average April's worth of rain, fell in less than 12 hours, causing up to 10 feet of water to inundate homes. I visited the area a few weeks ago to hear the story of one family.
We didn't expect the flood to come again because they said that the 2018 was a freak thing with all the other places that were flooded out, and that never happened here before. So we see in the rain, and we know it's dry season, so we're not looking out for any flood.
And while climate change did play a part, there are 2 more significant factors that play larger roles: improper or inadequate drainage to hold the volume of water that falls, and indiscriminate development. In the case of Mandillion Road, Sangre Grande, residents claim the flooding has now been worsened by a large area of land being cleared nearby, which has made this year's floods worse than 2018. The extent of the land cleared is evident from satellite images, and no additional drainage downstream was developed to capture the water that was previously held by trees, now running off faster. It's a similar situation playing out in hilly areas across the country with hillside development, but in the capital, you also have another reason.
The infrastructure, which is the drainage that is in Port of Spain, has been over 100 years old. So the drains, the capacity of the drains are smaller than what when there was a lot less development in the city of Port of Spain, and those drains were supposed to spill out into those rivers, and then eventually into the sea. So what has happened is, because the city has built up and then the drainage has not kept time with it.
There are also a myriad of issues concerning watercourses being cleared and rivers and their mouths being dredged, which can aid in runoff, but according to experts will not end flooding in TNT. Especially if we continue to litter the way we do, solid waste blockages can lead to flooding in cities and, in some instances, cause major water backlog issues.